Hey everyone and welcome to another video. So Blizzard broadly went over the endgame systems of Legion, but lots of detail was left out because they were just doing like an hour-long panel. Since then we've got more information and that's what I'm going to be covering today. So let's get right into the content and start off with challenge mode dungeons. So first of all, keystones. The way they're going to work is that players will get a single keystone per week baseline, though it may be possible to get more, but pretty much it's one baseline per player per week. Now, the way it works is your keystone starts off being empowered and having a level, and then it also has a par time. If you defeat a dungeon below that par time, then your keystone gets empowered to a higher level. Now, the way it's going to work is that once you fail a run, i.e. you complete the dungeon after the par time, what's going to happen is your keystone will be depleted, but you will get a big thing of loot at the end. A little bit like how in Diablo 3, if you're running a Greater Rift, you say you're on a level like 30 Greater Rift, but you don't make the par time, well, you get a big reward at the end. Nice and simple. After that, you will still be able to run the dungeon, but those dungeon runs won't give you your big thing of bonus loot at the end. Now, if you are using a depleted keystone, but then beat the dungeon on that level below the par time, what's going to happen is your keystone will get re-empowered. You'll get a keystone at a higher item level, which is in an empowered state that can give you loot. So essentially, if somebody messes up a run and you get a depleted keystone, that's not it over for the week. You can take another shot at it. I'm not sure how the loot specifics are going to work out there. I can see that being a little bit gamed. That's something I'll have to take into account, but essentially, I think this is a very, very good way of doing things, and it's nice that that keystone system has been clarified for us. Additionally, they have talked a little bit about how the loot works, so you get a weekly jackpot from your first series of runs. From what I can tell, we still need more specifics, but essentially, it seems like you do your first run of a keystone, then it gets depleted, and you get a big reward at the end of that. The rewards after that will be lesser in quality, and they want it to be so that overall, your main goal is to do your one keystone per week. I think that makes a good deal of sense, actually, and the idea of working towards this big thing of loot can be quite fun. What does concern me is the loot in that chest is going to be randomized, and sometimes you would maybe want a certain bit of gear from a certain boss in a dungeon. Will you be able to do that now? I'm not really that sure. They also talked about difficulty and rewards. So the difficulty will scale endlessly, but the rewards will not scale endlessly. Past a certain point, doing a higher and higher level of dungeon is just going to be for bragging rights and leaderboard position. So as an example, level 20 might be the last level that offers better loot, and anything past that will offer the same loot, but of course will be harder and will be something that you'll do for the sake of getting a high score. So loot and difficulty overall is such that mythic skill players will be able to find comparable loot in a very high level challenge mode dungeon. Now, all this stuff is interesting for loads of reasons. The fact that it caps out at a certain level is really good. Obviously, endless loot would be very silly, but it also means that you hopefully won't need a super specific comp in order to aim for the really good loot. It should be capped at a stage where every single comp can reasonably get the best loot as long as the people play well, but if you want to get, say, the number one highest challenge level on the server, then maybe you'll need to target a specific comp, similar to how getting a super good best time on a current day challenge mode dungeon is something that is going to require a specific comp that won't have room for some classes and specs. The idea of loot being pretty much up to the item level of mythic raids is pretty interesting, maybe a bit worrying, but I think overall the best gear will still be from raids because that gear is going to have set bonuses. The stuff from dungeons is not going to be in sets, won't have set bonuses, and it will likely be that we will see the best trinkets inside raids and not in dungeons. Finally, they are likely to not have challenge mode sets. Instead, that niche is going to be filled by challenge mode related artifact skins. So overall, this stuff has cleared up some concerns that I had about the system. It seems like something that's going to be open to all players and give a pretty reasonable level of loot. If you want to go crazy and go, super hardcore and try to get best scores and stuff like that, there is room for that, but that's not going to affect the gearing process, which I think is very important. Next up, we've got raiding. So they said raid sizes are going to remain at Warlords of Draenor levels. Overall, I think that's a good thing, and it worked out pretty okay in Warlords. Mythic is not going to be cross-realm out of the gate, though. They feel that preserving the idea of being the best guild on the server is pretty important. Next, they said that they are talking about moving from having a single massive raid per patch to have, say, maybe 2 smaller ones per patch, so the players would have more opportunities and just variety and options. Ian referenced Tempest Keep and Serpentine Cavern specifically, and I think that would be an absolutely excellent way to go with things. If you've got a 14 boss long raid, it is to a degree going to have linearity to it. Far more linearity and far less options than, say, 2 individual raids would give. I've been suggesting something like this for ages, and it's great to see that they might actually do it finally. Next up, we've got reputation and questing. So quest rewards are going to be pretty varied. You're going to have mounts, gear, pets, materials, artifact power, and class order stuff. They didn't say exactly what the class order stuff would be. As far as raid gear, they did clarify that the best stuff will be raid stuff, then it'll be dungeons, and last will be world content. Overall, I think that's a decent enough, it's what you'd expect for quest rewards. What's interesting is they didn't mention Valor points, and actually didn't mention Valor points for the challenge mode dungeons either. So we don't really know what things are going to be like in terms of a consistent currency to work towards, other than, say, artifact power to level up your artifact weapon. Next, they tackled the topic of reputations, saying that they wanted less mob grind reputations in comparison to Warlords of Draenor. Now, they did say that there may be 1 or 2 Timbermaw style reputations that are just full-on mob grinds, but most of the Legion reps will have emissary quests and world objectives that are associated with them. So doing the world objectives will get you a small amount of reputation, let's just say 100, but doing the emissary quest will give you a large amount, say 1,000. So an emissary quest could send you off to do 5 objectives for that faction in the world. There may be 10 or 15 objectives overall, but the emissary quest will just reward you for doing 5. Essentially, you'll be able to get a big chunk of rep every day via the emissary quest, and if you want to go the extra mile, then you'll be clearing out the map and doing all of the additional objectives, which is something that I'm pretty sure most players are going to be doing near the start of the expansion. Next, they covered the questions concerned by players of different levels attacking the same mob. So what if a level 102 player and a level 106 player are attacking the same mob, and that mob, from each player's perspective, is scaled to their level? Well, they essentially said that what actually matters is the percentage of health that the mob has, and the actual numbers don't really matter that much, so it's not going to be something that you'll really be concerned about or even have to think about. Finally, they said that mob tapping is going to work the same for world bosses, but for regular mobs, they want mob tapping to be a lot more shared between players so that free-form cooperation can be a thing without groups. Basically, if there's 5 players running around a questing area and there's loads of mobs there and everyone's just slaughtering everything, they should all be getting credit towards whatever quest they're doing, even if they aren't paired off in a group. I think that's great. Guild Wars 2 had that, and I loved how you were just naturally cooperating with people. That was a very good social dynamic for the game, and one that Warcraft hasn't had. Bringing it into this game arguably will make some things easier, but I think overall will be very good. They then tackled the topic of flying. They said that in patch 7.0, i.e. the launch of this expansion, you will be able to work towards the achievement that will unlock flying. Flying itself, though, is going to be unlocked at a later date. I think that's the best way to do it. If you think about it, this is going to be one big shared world at endgame, with relevant stuff in every single zone. Having loads of players going around on the ground in groups and things like that is going to be really cool. Warlords of Draenor did this thing where you couldn't fly, but there was also no reason to go out into the world, therefore you didn't really benefit from the perspective of being grounded in terms of the gameplay and the world design. Legion could actually have that, which again is very, very good. Next up, we've got some clarifications about classes. So they are doing blogs about each class in detail over the coming week, but overall they said that classes in general will be more simple at a base level, but that talent choices are going to allow you to add in a lot more depth. Essentially, you're going to be able to choose between passive talents and active talents a lot more, meaning the complexity is far more in the hands of players. What this probably means is that if you're a hardcore raider, you're going to be going for all of the active abilities and the more complex stuff. But if you're not an active raider and you're just chilling out in the world, you can probably just slap on the passives and not really have to worry about super complicated stuff. Next, they said that multi-strike was removed because it filled a similar role to crit, i.e. a chance of a spell doing more damage. And they did say specs that benefited from multi-strike in terms of a design perspective are probably going to have something similar in Legion, even with MS being gone. As for versatility, they said that it's staying because it fulfilled a niche, in that unlike any other secondary stat, it also has a defensive benefit. Next up, we've got healing and tanking. Unlike DPSing, it seems like they're getting some broader design changes. They said for healers that they wanted people to always have something to do, so in Legion they're going to be offering more DPS potential when you have healing downtime. Looking at the Priest class overview, it certainly seems like that's going to be the case. Next up, and in a similar vein to that past point, they said that players should be able to level up in the world using a healing spec. It probably won't be the fastest thing, but it's certainly something that's going to be more feasible than it is now. As far as tanking goes, they said that they felt like active mitigation was actually too strong, and it was originally supposed to be something to reward skilled tanks, but now they feel like it creates too large of a skill gap where people who do use it really well are gods, and people who don't use it really well just get destroyed all the time. So what they've said is that they're going to tone it down a little bit and add long cooldowns to the list of things that actually count as active mitigation. And finally, for the tanks, Resolve is gone. They said that they've designed the classes not to actually need it anymore, though, for an example, Brewmasters are going to have a stagger buff or a cleanse from their active mitigation to actually compensate for the fact that Resolve won't be a thing. I suppose that's kind of interesting. Vengeance brought a lot of problems during Mists of Pandaria. It seems like Resolve didn't really bring as many, other than the fact that they now think it's just added fluff that they don't really need. I don't really tank though, so it's hard really to speak much on that topic. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with the stuff that they cleared up. These challenge mode dungeons look like a really fun thing to do, and other than the RNG reward element, and how I'm not really the biggest fan of that because, I mean, come on, it's very Diablo 3-ish, and I don't know if that makes as much sense in World of Warcraft, but it does seem like a very good system, and all of that stuff about ensuring that people aren't going to be demanding a specific comp to get the gear, I think that is very important, because that was definitely a concern. On the topic of the open world reputation and questing, though, what I really want to know, actually, is will these reputations have story quests? They did say they wanted to have some of the benefits of the Mist of Pandaria model, so that would lead me to assume that there will be story quests every once in a while during reps, but they haven't actually mentioned that at all, which is really odd if that is their goal. They should probably speak up about that at some point. If the reputations do end up just being, you know, go do quests in the main world, but there's no specific, like, story content and plot quests or plot scenarios, then I think they're really going to be missing something. But overall, it's definitely very heartening stuff across the board, and with those concerns, I think, met, it's looking up a lot for the Legion endgame. They're certainly prioritizing gameplay that I think is a lot better than what was done with Warlords of Draenor. Anyway, that's it for me. They'll probably give us more details pretty soon, and hell, even the beta is apparently in the next few weeks, so there will absolutely be more clarifications and more details, but for now, that's a more clarified overall picture of how this stuff is going to work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.